Randy McStine, Mutual Hallucinations. Sometimes you'll hear me talk about the Prague Illuminati. This is kind of like a group of musicians that sit behind the scenes of a lot of contemporary progressive rock and show up on people's albums and contribute to them in a very kind of classic way. And by that I mean they're fantastic musicians that can plug themselves into almost any challenging musical situation, but are still able to keep their own personal voice in there. Because in my opinion, classic progressive rock always allowed the personality of the player to shine through. Randy McStine is one of these people. He runs in circles with Marco Miniman and Steven Wilson. He's been a sideman for Porcupine Tree the last tour that they did. And he's a really fantastic musician who has his own specific style that he's able to keep sort of coherent as he plugs himself in these different situations. So it's really great to hear him play in this solo album setting and actually hear what his voice sounds like without the influence of other people. And this particular album is one of those ones that kind of fits in that space between prog and pop in a really interesting way. I think in some ways he sits in that same space that Kevin Gilbert often used to, especially when you talk about the shaming of the true, where things are too pop to be prog and too prog to be pop. But one of the things about this album is that his songwriting is relatively concise. They're kind of intricate pop tunes. But on the other hand, he has these instrumentals that are way more intricate and way more identifiably progressive rock, in my opinion. What really sold me on this album was the song Adopted Sons, and that song really resonated with me very strongly. And as I went through and started checking out some of the songs, many of the other songs have the same kind of deep, emotionally charged lyrics, which I found really, really appealing. And his ability, too, to kind of create moods above these, still within the confines of a pop song, I think, is really respectable, and it really comes off well on this. I do think when you listen to the album as a whole, there's a little bit of unevenness because the way that I think the instrumentals feel so identifiably prog and so identify almost like, jazz fusion in some ways. And then it shifts back over to something a little bit more, prog pop. It feels a little bit uneven, but at the same time, it's a situation where these are different facets of Randy McStine's personality, and they all do cohere under his unique musicianship, I think, in a convincing way.